Hello and welcome to the Monster Mechanics podcast, where we take creatures of myth and media and see how they can be improved. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and with me as always is the Calvin to my Hobbs, Zach Jaquays. What are we talking about today, Zach?
This week we are talking about the Nazgul.
So the Nazgul, ring wraiths, or black riders, they have probably several other names as well, including other elvish words, are one of the antagonists of the Lord of the Rings series of books. They are 9 formerly human kings that were given rings of power that have then turned them into these dark, unearthly, creepy ass things that they show up in the movies, and they're in the books as well. Led by the Witch King of Angmar. They all have various names and stuff too, although we're not going to go into that. So one of the big caveats on this one is that Zach and I have both seen the movies and read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Neither of us have read the Silmarillion. So if there are answers to these questions dug deep into those things, into, texts that we don't know about that show up on wikis and places, we're not going to worry about that. This is us doing our own thing here. So we're not too worried about canon. So I think the image that we're both thinking of is those Peter Jackson movies, really kind of took over my image of the Black Riders, the Nazgul. They look so good.
Oh, absolutely. They nailed the aesthetic. That is just about the creepiest, dark pursuer figure I could imagine. So
yeah,
props to them for that. And that scream. Oh man.
Oh yeah. And we're specifically talking about how they appear in the physical world, because we see them a couple times when Frodo puts on the ring and they look different. And I got to say, I'm a bit underwhelmed by those. I think that their material plane version looks a lot better. I love the dark cloaks, but then the armored hands sticking out from them to imply that they've got suits of armor that are all jaggedy and stuff under there. That's great. And the way the Witch King looks in the final battle at Gondor, oh, that's such a good design. Oh my God. He's 9 feet tall and he's got that huge mace. Oh man, I love that.
Mm-hmm. The thing he's riding, I forget the name of it. But
it's got
bat wings, pteranodon looking thing.
Yeah, with the huge long neck. Oh, yeah. They really nailed that. I cannot give the Weta Workshop guys enough credit for the various things they did for those movies. They really created an aesthetic that has back channeled its way into the entire way I think about those books.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the way you put it was the just ate a lemon look of them in the is pretty bad. Yeah. Of them in the when you see them in the ring realm or the shadow realm or whatever we're gonna call it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the concept, I do love the idea that the version of them that we see in the world, the physical manifestation of them is not their true form. It's the way we see it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. I think we can play around in that space some more.
Yeah, I almost hate to change that. So I kind of want to focus more on what they look like in this other realm. I feel like that's where we have room for improvement. And I know originally they were supposed to be the 9 mortal men, right?
Yeah. Yes. They're 9 human kings who are, I think they're all kings, who are given the rings as rings of power. And they do the same thing that the other rings do, where they extend your life and give you extra charisma and power and stuff. But in this case, none of the men were strong enough to resist the pull of Sauron. And so their wills were subsumed and they were sort of consumed by Sauron's power and changed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a line I'm thinking about it's in Fellowship of the Ring, where Bilbo talks about how he's lived, he hasn't really aged in the 50 years or whatever since The Hobbit, when he first acquired the ring. But he says that he feels like he's been spread a bit thin, like too little butter on too much toast, which is I love that line, which is why I can remember it off the top of my head, which I normally can't do that kind of stuff. But yeah, I love the idea that it doesn't give you new life. It just spreads the life that you normally would get out thinner over time.
Interesting.
You're getting by with less and less of it over time. You start off with your normal amount, but it's that thing where it's the paradox where instead of you're getting half as much each, it's halving itself and getting closer and closer, but never quite reaching the destination of death. Maybe that's what these rings are doing to the mortal men, where it's extending their life.
That's a really cool idea. I like that.
Yeah. And so what they're ending up with is a form of, it's not enough life to keep you vital and like it's not true. It's like it's sort of a false version of life, which could explain their appearance and everything like that. Maybe they look like, when you see their faces, they look incredibly old, and they still have like strength and stuff in them, but like they have like the old wrinkly skeletal hands of old men and like liver spots and stuff when you see them in the shadow realm. That could be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And like there's a thing that when particularly when people are old, like the way they bruise is different. Like they kind of like they can get punctured a little bit, and then that bruise will actually spread out and get huge because the body's having a hard time containing the blood loss subcutaneously, and it makes this big red purple splotches. You can just imagine like all of them looking like that. You know,
yeah,
that would be really cool. So there's an aspect, I don't remember if this is in the books or not, but it's definitely in the movies where like when Frodo puts on the ring, like they can see him better. Like he lights up like a Christmas tree for them. And that proposed to me that like and the fact that they look different in this other realm and they see him more when he is in that realm makes me think that like what we're seeing in the physical, in the regular world that everybody else is really just a projection of their true selves, which is in this other shadow realm, wherever it is that the One Ring takes you. That's really cool. We should play on that.
Yeah. Okay. I think the other interesting kind of moniker for them is the Black Riders.
Yes.
Is what they're often called. And I feel like that's kind of like an important aspect of them, is that they're tied into like being these pursuers always riding in search of the ring.
Yeah. And yeah, the fact that they can't like settle down and like form and they can't like, they're no longer tied to a place. Like it's interesting because they're all kings. So they all would have had a kingdom at some point. And then now they are restless and never can settle down because they're the Black Riders. Like they've had that central part of their identity robbed from them in this way too, which is really neat. Yeah, I definitely agree on that one. One thing that would be kind of neat would be to give them, like, make their mounts part of their like identity more. Like the Witch King has his big, like, they all start off on just like black horses, and then later on in Return of the King they get upgraded to these big, flying kind of dragony things, kind of wyvern style creatures. What if that wasn't just like, Sauron decided to give them a present for, I don't know, the birthday or something like that. It wasn't just like a physical object, a real creature that was giving to them, but it's the mounts become like a manifestation of their power or an extension of themselves, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
And that like maybe that how much they can manifest that and how useful they are is like in direct relation to, like, let's say how close they are to Sauron's seat of power. So like when they're out across the world on the other side of the Misty Mountains, they can only get their black horses to form. But on the, like just outside of the gates of Mordor, like they can make those mounts into the giant flying dragon creatures that we were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And then maybe like, rather than like seeing like a physical creature there, you would see like the shadowy outline of a creature, that they're riding on. That could be really cool.
Oh, that's kind of cool. And I love the idea that if there's like a natural extension to like this power, like to go beyond, like if Sauron had conquered, like what would their mounts be like? Yeah, they could have either they have like the winged creatures all over, or maybe like even grow larger and like more powerful. So another interesting idea would be that like these guys, they were separate individuals back in the day. Like these were all like there were several Númenórean kings and several. One of them was an Easterling. Some of them were something else. Okay, those are the ones that are listed. Several Númenóreans and an Easterling. So there's got to be other guys in there. But like these were all individuals once, and like now they are kind of all the same. Like they're all they when they appear in the world, they like they all wear the same hoods. They all have the same swords. But what if when you see them in the Shadow Realm, in that place that's where they actually exist, they all like retain the individuality of themselves back there. Like they specialize in different ways in that way. Interesting.
But that when we see them in the physical world, we're only seeing a projection of them, and all of those, because like two men's shadows could look the same, but even if the men are different, like these projections into our world happen to look all the same. That could be kind of cool.
I kind of like that. Like I'm kind of picturing, like I kind of have this image in my mind, like where when you see them in the shadow realm, where you're seeing their true forms, like you're also seeing like them surrounded like in the echoes and imagery of like the kingdoms they once ruled.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm not certain how that would manifest exactly, but I feel like it's kind of a cool idea to play with.
Yeah. So maybe it's one of those things where like when their power is great, like when they are really strong, they start to they're able to project more of that shadow realm, that sort of place where past and future mingle with them into our realm and project it. And maybe that like clouds people's minds and makes them see glimpses of the way the world once was and the kingdoms that these guys used to rule. And so you get little like flashes and glimpses of like their past, because it's the past that's being brought forward to extend their life. Like again, it's stretching out that life that they should have ended long ago. And so like they're kind of dragging all of that with them around all of the time. And when when their power is at its greatest, it starts to like affect the mortals around them, and they can start to see it and like react to it and stuff like that.
That's cool. Yeah.
That is.
Gosh, I had a thought and I lost it.
That's all right. Well, so I love this idea that like, yeah, they're existing more in another realm than ours. Like they're still sort of casting a shadow into the physical realm, but they mostly exist in this second shadow realm, this place where the ring takes you, which I'm just going to keep calling the shadow realm because that's the closest I can think of it.
Yeah, makes sense.
And which means most people don't see them like in their original form a lot. But also I love the idea that there's such a good option to play with that idea of this like secondary reality that's like quite close to ours that only a couple of characters, people with rings of power, have access to. And so like, one of the things is like what the rules don't have to be the same there. So things like maybe when you're in the shadow realm, the realness of things isn't the same as they are in our world. So like, the idea I mentioned before on chat was that like the natural world totally exists in the shadow realm exactly as it does right here. So trees and rocks and mountains and things like that are the same, but man-made objects, because they don't carry through the same power of the creator, they don't exist in the shadow realm at all. So like if you are sitting inside of a building, then and one of these wraiths is standing outside, he can see you. And in fact, he could walk right through that man-made wall because it doesn't exist for him.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really cool, creepy element to these guys.
Yeah. Whereas if you were behind a tree, that's a normal impediment for them. And then like you could totally see like there are ways to interact with that. Like the elves build in a different way than men do. Like they're more in touch with the natural magic of the world. So maybe elvish structures that are like older, things from like the first age maybe, they do project themselves at least somewhat into the shadow realm. And so like I love the idea that like when Frodo puts on the ring, if he was to see what's the name of it? Oh crap. The place where the elves are. Rivendell.
Rivendell?
Yeah. Rivendell. The moment I almost said that, and then I was like, isn't that the place where Archie lives? Which I think is Riverdale.
That would be a very different comic.
Somebody please make the CW TV show that is Riverdale, but set in Elrond's Rivendell. Where it's the dark and gritty. All right, no, that wasn't a CW show. That was a Netflix show. Okay, anyway. So, but like, I love the idea that Frodo puts on the ring, and instead of seeing like he's used to seeing like buildings disappear and stuff, and instead he sees like the elvish buildings as they actually are, or as they were in the first age, or something like that. The fact that like the ring could reveal more about the world around you would be really cool.
I also kind of like the idea that maybe it's just the shadows extending into the shadow realm of like the buildings of man-made structures and whatnot. So like trees and whatnot, but like we'll be there, but you'll only see like the darkness or the silhouettes of things.
That would be a very cool visual.
That were man-made.
It also might explain why the Nazgul seem to appear more powerful at night too, is because like they're existing within a shadow, like the whole world is in shadow at night. And so therefore it's closer to what they're used to. Like it's close, the shadow realm is closer than it normally would be at night than during the day, because it's actually pushing out that world where they exist. That's cool.
I like that.
Let's see, what else can we do with these guys? Do they have names? No, only one. We got the Winch King of Angmar and Kamul the Easterling, which I don't really want to deal into J.R.R. Tolkien's like kind of not so great treatment of what he called the Easterlings. Yeah. Man, so I guess we do have to start to think a little bit more about these 13 rings of power, I think it is, something like that. 15. How many rings of power are they?
19 rings of power.
It says 20 on the Wikipedia page, because there's the 1 to ring, 3 for the elves, 7 for the dwarves, that's 10, 9 for them. Yeah, and then 1 for the, so it's 20 total. Yeah. I don't know about you. I know that somewhere out there's a really strong explanation of what all of the rings of power do and like what they're for and all that stuff. But like, do you have any idea what they are? Because I don't. And I've
not really. Like, it's always just like, at least in the movies, which is what I'm most familiar with. I read the books once long ago as a child.
Yeah.
There's like, they're very powerful, and obviously being able to turn invisible, at least in the physical realm, seems like a great benefit.
So I know that.
But yeah,
I know a couple of things. Like, one is that like the original rings of power weren't constructed by Sauron. I think they were constructed by other people. I think mostly it was just Celebrimbor. Maybe he just did the one. But so they were originally created separately, and then Sauron created the One Ring in order to subsume the other 19. And like he like used it as like a backdoor, like a hack. Like he hacked into the mainframe a little bit with this special one magic ring in order to mess up the other ones. And it worked really well for the 9 human rings and the 7 for the dwarf lords. According to what I remember, the only thing it did was like make them really greedy, and then made them like hoard gold, which doesn't seem like, I don't know. Again, that doesn't really totally like jive with me. Like that seems like it honestly, it sounds like J.R.R. Tolkien wanted to have them in there, but then didn't know what to do with them. And then the 3 for the elves were like powerful rings that I know that, like, I think Elrond has one. What's her name has one. The fancy lady that everybody really loves, whose name escapes me. Galadriel. Yes. The only thing I think of was that she played Hela on Thor Ragnarok. And then Gandalf has one, which I remember when I was reading the books for the first time, like they revealed that fact, like those 3 rings were still held by these people that you'd like known the whole time. And they were just like using them the whole thing. And I'm like, it's like right at the end of the book, like literally like Frodo's about to get on the boat to leave the world and go die. And Gandalf's like, oh yeah, by the way, those 3 elven rings, we've had them the whole time. They're right here. It's cool. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, what the like, what did they, and I guess the answer is that like the elves figured out what was happening and were able to prevent the same thing happening to them that happened to the 9. I don't know. This doesn't seem like a proper cosmology to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that just felt insufficiently explored, at least in the trilogy.
Yes. And like, I know the One Ring, like the power that we see mostly is the ability for it to turn you invisible, which I like the idea that it's not really turning you invisible. It's putting you into the shadow realm, like the place of Sauron. And it looks like invisibility to everybody else, but it's actually doing something else, which is that's a really cool manifestation of that power. But I know also like it's a part of Sauron's soul, or his magic. Like he put it into this ring. In fact, he put too much of it in there, and that's why he's been weakened this whole time. And everybody who because Frodo keeps offering the ring to people. He's like, here, you should take it. No, you should take it. No, you should take it. And everybody's like, I'd love to, but I would be terrible with it. Like I would use this power for evil. And I'm like, which implies that it has tons of power, that if you could access the power within it, you could do all kinds of really cool stuff. And it's just the fact that like, I guess Frodo's a dumbass and doesn't know how to do it, or because he doesn't know magic. So maybe it's something like that where like you have to be able to unlock the powers with, you know, knowledge or something like that, or with your own magic, I guess. Like you could imagine like each of them giving the, okay. So you could imagine each of these rings, like each ring has the power of the ones in the tier below it as well. Mm-hmm. So like the 9 rings for the men have the lowest amount of power each. The 7 rings for the dwarves have that amount of power plus some additional stuff. And then the 3 have, for the elves, have that plus the ones below it. And then the 1 ring is more powerful than all of them together. It can do what each of those individually can do plus more. That seems reasonable to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then at each of those tiers, you could think about the kind of people those rings were made for and what it is that they would want more than anything else. So like the 9 rings extend life. They give you a longer lifespan. They the promise of eternal life, because mortal men, as the like most short-lived race in Middle Earth, that's what they covet more than anything else. Like they want to have more life. Whereas that's not super important to the dwarves and the elves because they live long, hundreds of years anyway. So that's like the base tier 9, like the 9's power. Like those rings extend your life. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then the dwarves do that, and then they also do something else. Maybe like maybe it like allows you to sense other. I was gonna say like gold and gems, but because that seems like what dwarves would want. But maybe there's a better answer there, depending on how you like define like what you think the sort of the base nature of a dwarf is.
I feel like maybe there's like an innate like understanding maybe of like the stone, like because like stereotypically dwarves are always associated with like impressive architecture, like long lasting craftsmanship.
Yeah. Maybe it gives you like
a cool take.
Yeah. Like an additional perception of the material world and like the properties that are around it. And maybe like an ability to like see and sense some magic, which is something like one of the things, maybe I'm misremembering this, but if I remember correctly, dwarves don't like interact with magic normally. Like they're able to make very fine rings and very fine swords and stuff like that, but they don't have any like wizards amongst them. That's like sort of antithetical to their nature. And so you could imagine that like one of the things that those 7 rings might promise is an ability to perceive, like to sort of get in touch with that part of the world that they don't have anything for, right? Like that gives them a window into a part of the world that they're not used to and makes them special amongst the dwarves. Like now their kings can see magic and can like perceive the magical threats around them and stuff. That could be kind of cool. So something along those lines would be really cool. And then the thing I was thinking for the elves is the ability to preserve things. Like because the characterization that I can think of for elves in the Lord of the Rings series more than anything else is like they want things to stay the same. Like they don't like the idea of change. They want to preserve the old ways. And like it's only at the end of the Lord of the Rings when like the last of the elves leave, and it's because they're like, yeah, it turns out that like this is a world where things have to change, and that doesn't have any place for us in it. And they instead go off to like their version of heaven where things are always as great as they always were be. And I'm like, to me, I'm like, wow, like your idea of heaven is like the world that you had thousands of years ago. It's not like, it's like antithetical to progress. But like, there are beautiful, like important things that come from preservation too. Like, you know, they can keep the world around them, or like the things from rotting. They can keep disease at bay. It makes them healers. Like there's positive signs associated with that as well.
I mean, all I'm hearing is basically elves peaked in high school.
Yeah. On a global scale, they absolutely were those guys who peaked in high school and are just riding off of that this whole time. And they don't want to wake up to the world where now they are a fat car salesman with a bald patch instead of the quarterback. And then, so like, yeah, I like that idea that there's things all about preservation. And then personally, if I was writing that series, and obviously I'm not J.R.R. Tolkien, but I would have like each one of those, once they become subsumed by Sauron, like it seems like that's an opportunity to do cool stuff with your storytelling, rather than just like say, oh yeah, it made the dwarves, it made them greedy, and the elves, because they're super awesome, because Tolkien loves his elves so much and thinks that they're so special, that like it just doesn't affect them. Like they were able to figure out how to like do it, how to prevent the bad parts of these rings from affecting them. So like here's the idea. What happens to these original 10 other ring bearers? Because we have the 9, the dark riders, but then like what happens to the dwarves and the elves?
Well, canonically, I think all the original dwarf holders of the rings were slain, and the rings were either destroyed in dragon fire or reclaimed by Sauron. Yeah,
which F that. Like, let's do something cool. Like this seems like a wasted opportunity. So let's fix that. What is the dwarf version of a Nazgul?
The dark rider of ponies.
I'm thinking like we had said that it gives them if it does the same thing that the 9 do, it like pulls them into the shadow realm. All right. But I think that's for a dwarf, it's got to interact with them differently than it does with men. Like they get pulled in a different way.
I think like we talked about like the elven construction being able to be seen in there. And I kind of like the idea. What if like the dwarves can mine in the darkness or in the shadow realm? Like there's something that they can, like some resource they can harvest there from it.
Ooh, maybe that's where Mithril comes from. Because like because Tolkien made that up. So yeah, like they are actually mining into the shadow realm, into this other dimension in order to find these objects. It's like this things of power.
And I mean, we've got there's that famous line where they dug too greedily and too deep and unearthed the Balrog. And that absolutely would have come from the shadow realm.
Yeah, maybe so I've got 2 ideas. I'm gonna propose both of them. One of them is that as they are opening up the access to the shadow realm using these rings, the power of them, and like the ability to see magic and the material world around them and how it interacts. And from those portals, Sauron is able to introduce other monsters, right? Like that's where the Balrog comes from, which is I'm pulling from this is the very edge of my Lord of the Rings wiki deep diving. I think the Balrogs are the same species, the same level of creature as Gandalf and the other wizards. They're the Maiar, I believe. They're just the dark version of it.
They're basically like angels or something in this world.
Yes. They're like a tier, because like there's the god of the world who created everything, and then there's the Valar, I believe, which are what Sauron is. They're like the level below. And then there's the Maiar below them, which is what Gandalf and the other wizards were, Saruman as well. And then I think the Balrogs are just the Maiar who followed Sauron and Saruman. Not Saruman. No, what's Sauron's boss? Malgar, something like that. Malok, forget. This is again, we neither of us have read the Silmarillion. I'm just pulling like what I remember from reading the wiki like billions of years ago. Okay, so maybe though, like during the point where the defeat of what's his name, Sauron's boss, all of those guys got locked away, and it is through the mining of the dwarves that those portals are opened and these things get introduced back into the world, and maybe other interesting and crazy, and maybe not even like necessarily evil things, but just like more like things that weren't meant to exist in this world make it their way, like failed designs for creatures and stuff like that could find their way through. And then the other that was one proposition. And the other one is like the Nazgul, these dwarven kings, the 7 dwarven kings, like they go deeper and deeper into that shadow realm and eventually they disappear. And then when we see them again, they are trapped as like spirits in stone.
Oh, interesting.
Like they can move through the walls of caverns, are trapped within the physical stone itself. Like they're not, their version of being trapped in the shadow realm is that like they can't pass into the air. Like they're trapped within the earth itself. And that makes them a different sort of threat.
Well, that's a cool idea. And it also kind of explains like why they're kind of removed from the story. Is like there's not like a direct physical interaction for them because they're kind of entrapped in that stone. But
Yeah. And they might act more as scouts and eyes than the Nazgul are like the hunters. They're like kind of an enforcer, right? Whereas these dwarven kings, like they can't interact with the world much, but they can observe it really well. Like because they can move under people's feet and in their walls and stuff like that and observe and like keep track of everything.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, I think that works. Okay. So what's the Nazgul version of an elf then? We get 3 elves who get subsumed. And these are presumably like big, awesome elves who are able to do all kinds of cool So what happens when, and they have the power of preservation. So what is it that the Nazgul version of an elf is?
I like the idea that they have like some method of like enforcing a stasis on like an area or a person through the Shadow Realm.
Yeah. Like, you find these, like maybe like the Nazgul are the riders, right? Like they're constantly on the move, on the hunt, and the dwarves disappeared into the darkness, and the elves like took their instinct to the extreme, and they have like their original seats of power are now these like time-stopped crystalline structures where everything is the same as it was forever. And then if you go into it, you become trapped as well in your own past.
Interesting. I love the idea that like, so are you thinking like this occurs like just in the Shadow Realm, or is like this something that can like bleed through into the material world?
I think it's happening somewhere in between both. They are so powerful that they have like collapsed the waveform between these two realms. And like, these are the crossover points where the Shadow Realm and our realm, the Middle Earth area, like are one. Like there isn't a distinction there. So like walking into one of these areas, you find yourself like, this is where a normal person might be able to even perceive what the Shadow Realm is like, because they're now directly interacting with it. And like these elves have like had several thousand years, and they've like trapped this area in the very past. Like the people who were living there then are quote unquote living there now, but they are trapped in some sort of stasis, or maybe they're repeating the same day Groundhog style, or something or maybe like various or different variations where things don't make sense anymore. That could be really cool.
I really like that idea, like that there's something of value to be gained by going there, like lost knowledge or something in these places, but it's dangerous because it's so easy for you to become trapped in this place. Just lost to time. Yes.
That would be really cool. In fact, maybe that's what, like maybe that, like one of them, you have three dudes, which are, or dudettes, who are, so there's 3 areas. Maybe each one has a different thing. Like maybe one of them was the Great Elvish Library, where all of like elven knowledge from the first age was kept. And because it has become this hugely dangerous area, 2 things have happened. One, there's all this really interesting knowledge, all of these like lost secrets that are there. But the reason that they're lost is because that's where the library was. Like nobody can go and like get any of that knowledge now because it's super dangerous. So like that explains why a bunch of these like secrets were lost, is because they were being preserved in a place that has now become dangerous. But like if you're strong, if you're, Gandalf the White or whatever like that, maybe you can go in there and get some of that stuff, do the research you need.
I also kind of like the idea that maybe like the influence they're exerting is like slowly expanding and gradually like reverting the area to this like particular point in time when they picked up the ring. And so like mortal men and whatnot will rapidly like find their existence just like dissolving away because they're being forced back to a time where they'd never existed.
Yeah. Or maybe being replaced by an ancestor. Like you find yourself like,
oh yeah.
And I love the idea that also like, you don't know what's going to happen. Like there's not like one thing that will happen if a mortal man comes in here. Some of them will start to de-age. Some of them will just start to fade away. Some of them will start to like turn into their direct ancestor who was alive at the time. Some of them will, like just disappear. Some of them will turn to crystal, some of them will turn to stone. Like you don't really know what's going to happen, which that kind of chaos is great. Yeah, that's really cool. And so you have these, the 9, the I kind of do like the idea that, hey man, hey buddy. I can hear that on the mic. He's scratching and it's hitting his donut. What was I saying?
We're talking about the elves. And
yes. And the idea that they would have, we don't really know what will happen if you go in there to get the cool stuff. Mm-hmm. And yeah. Oh yeah, I was gonna say was the Nazgul, the 9, like they work very directly for Sauron, I guess. Like they're his enforcers. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of like the idea that as they go up the ranks, they've still been affected by it, but they're not working for him as directly. So like the 7, the dwarves who've been turned into these like wraiths that like live inside stone, they are working for Sauron in the sense that like he knows what they know and they are kind of seeking out knowledge, but they're not like taking direct orders. And then finally, like the elves have like given into this instinct to preserve, and they've trapped these areas of the area around them, but they're still trying to work against Sauron himself. It's just that he has subsumed their nature such that they are now acting antithetical to like the progress in the world. But like if you go in there and talk to them, like they're a little bit more like mad kings than they are like direct,
So I want to kind of go back a bit to the dwarves for a moment.
Please do.
So aren't the Uruk-hai like pulled from the earth? Like that's their whole thing.
There are like several conflicting ideas of where the orcs and Uruk-hai come from, because I know that there's a lot of drama around the idea that they're actually like corrupted elves. Like that was like Sauron or his boss like took elves and like tortured them and remade them in order to turn them into orcs. But then obviously in the version in the movies we see they're like being pulled like whole hog from the earth, which is a cool visual. I really like that. So I know that there's also conflicting ideas about it but go ahead.
Yeah, following up on that visual scene in the movies, like I kind of like the idea that like they're pulled from the dwarf touched stone from the Shadow Realm.
Okay,
like anywhere that the dwarves have passed with the influence of those rings, like has corrupted the stone itself into this living embodiment of hatred.
Yeah, that could be cool, and it would. Yeah, I'm down for that idea. I also, if it was me writing those books, I would do a lot more effort to say something along the lines of like, yeah, like the orcs are not like sentient in the same way that you and I are. Like they don't have a like they're magical constructs or something like that, rather than being like dudes who know what restaurants are because they know what a menu is. It's like, I don't know. There's a lot of philosophical problems to have with like the all evil race, of guys who are all you don't have to feel bad about killing them because they're all evil. And it's like, yeah, that's the same kind of language that people use for, real life people, which is no good. So I'm not sure how to fix that, but yeah.
I mean, now that you brought up the thing about the meat being back on the menu, now I'm just picturing like a quaint little Mordor bistro or something.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, meat is not on the menu tonight.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I do like the idea of the armies of Sauron aren't like, there is something to be said for like armies of like corrupted men, people who've been like promised power and are willing to like take that deal. That's a cool idea. Not like, oh, we've gotten this whole nation of men who like are just following along with doing orders, but like rather the individual bad people from the round world are like drawn together to form an army. That's kind of cool. But then also the idea that like we are also just filling it out with huge ranks of like that aren't even men, just like animated stone that because there's like literally poured hatred into a rock until the rock started to fight back. That is cool. Yeah. Maybe it's like gems or something like that that are touched by those by the 7 become like little concentrated hatred little rocks that you can then implant in something else that like you can construct the orcs. And then maybe the Uruk-hai, like the best of the orcs, they're made better. Like you literally built a better body for them, which is why they are more dangerous.
That's cool.
That could be kind of, that has some appeal to it. I could see that being a better version of it than like the idea that like, cause literally people are like, oh yeah, well, killing orcs is just like killing POWs who've like been brainwashed. And it's like, oh, come on, guys. Like, hey, can't we just have some stuff every once in a while? But then also like, yeah, I guess also Tolkien probably could have spent some time thinking about this a little bit more too. Like,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. So like in this version of it, like there's this whole like ecostructure. I don't know. Ecology, this like structure, this like rank and file of these various types of ring wraiths. There's not just the Nazgul, the Dark Riders. There are these other things, the dwarves and the elves and stuff too. And that also means that what does this also say about what the One Ring gives you? Like when Frodo puts on that One Ring, he gets all of the power that is available to the other sets of rings too. So like he gets the ability to see into the Shadow Realm, but he should also be able to like look in and find portals into the Shadow Realm, because that's what the dwarves were able to do. And then like also to I guess it would also grant the ability to like heal and preserve and stuff, the things that it gave the elves. That would be really neat to like, because one thing that I get what Tolkien was doing in those books about like, yeah, the least powerful people in the world, the hobbits, right, who are just the most humble, you know, they desire nothing other than like 6 meals a day, are the perfect ones to carry the ring because they won't be tempted by the power. But like by not defining what that power was and not showing it to us, it is harder for us to internalize that message as an audience. To be like, Frodo never has a moment in the books where he's like, until the very end, and he's just like, I'll just keep it because I like it. But if like he was shown a point where like, yeah, one of your friends' lives is threatened, you have the power in your hand right now to save them. But if you do that, that's one step towards becoming the thing that you by embracing that power, you're embracing all of the darkness that comes with it. So like, but can you imagine the moment of like knowing the One Ring can heal people and Boromir is in front of you dying, like right now. And like, do you save him or not? You know, and that becomes an interesting moral quandary, which I think is a missed opportunity.
Especially after we just see Boromir just going for the ring, like illustrating like the lure of its power.
Right. But then also resisting it and turning around to fight the orcs, and that's what kills him as well. And like there would be, if you could have that moment in the story, that would be really interesting as a way to illustrate, you know, like what it means to give up that power. But then also why doing so is important, you know. There would probably even be a lesson in there about how sort of all power is evil, like when it's a disparity, like everyone should have power or no one should have more than others, you know, kind of idea. There's an interesting idea in there about like how having authority over other people's is innately problematic. And that could be really cool. That would give you some more dimensionality to that story if you were able to communicate it. But yeah, so I think it's a pretty cool version of the Nazgul. We've like gone into a whole revamp here of that setup, really, because you know, this is really a hole that we're trying to fill here because there's like just not that much knowledge there, you know. Although it's to us, probably, like I said,
not to us.
Yeah, I'm sure somewhere in the 5 billion words of the Silmarillion, all of these answers are perfectly explained. But you know, whatever. All right. Well,
I think we're good.
All right. Well, then later. Bye.
Until next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Monster Mechanics. Did you know we have a Patreon? Currently, there's only one reward tier, and that's to have a custom thank you read out in an outro just like this one. So if you want to support us and make sure that this podcast can keep going on into the future, head on over to patreon.com/monsterpod and help us out. Now on to the credits. Monster Mechanics is produced and edited by me, Scott Paladin, and hosted by myself and my best friend, Zach Jaquays. You can probably